Here in America, we're gaining weight. In 1990, the average weight of a U.S. citizen was 161 pounds. By 2020, just 30 years later, the average weight went up to 181, a 20-pound increase. The rate of obesity varies by state. The state with the most obesity has almost 41% of residents falling into that category. That's Mississippi. The state with the lowest obesity rate, around 24%, is Colorado. Today you'll hear from Ray. At one point in his life, Ray was way above average in a category that no one wants to be above average in. He weighed over 500 pounds. He knew his weight was way up there, but it was when they weighed him at the doctor's office that he realized how high it was. So he made the decision to do something about it, and his turnaround has been amazing. He now runs ultra marathons. These are foot races from around 30 miles to even 100 miles, some of them more. This is a flashback episode. Ray came on the podcast and told his story about 5 years ago, so I wanted to bring him back on and ask the question that everyone wants to know. Has he kept the weight off? You'll hear the answer to that right after our conversation. Real people in unreal situations.
The eerie silence when I walked in, and he's just staring at me.
I was like, hello, like, are you okay? And then I had to tell him it was me.
There was just blood everywhere.
They're shouting, they're screaming, they're being hit by bullets, they're hitting the ground.
And in that moment, I literally thought, this is how I die.
Everything changed then.
And I just thought to myself, this isn't happening.
Every single story deserves to be heard.
I'm Scott Johnson, and this is What Was That Like? Ray, what kind of work do you do?
Currently, I'm a project manager for a large company that builds online websites for customers and marketing here in Jacksonville.
So kind of an IT kind of oriented position?
Yeah, it's an office job. I'm at my desk for a good portion of the day. I roll out big releases that we have for our customer service department. I kind of coordinate between our marketing group and product group and make sure we're getting our call center agents the information they need.
It sounds like kind of the type of job where you wouldn't be. It would be considered a kind of a sedentary position. You're not out walking
Correct.
around or anything like that. Okay. That kind of fits with the story here. Let's take us back 2.5 years ago. You were 34 years old. What was your life like then?
Well, I would like to say I was happy. At the time I seemed happy, but I was 34 years old. My life was pretty much getting up, going to work, coming home. I was over 500 pounds. I didn't know how much I weighed at the time. I just knew that, I always kind of knew I was a big guy, and most of it was attributed to eating real poorly. I made a lot of bad food choices, which I found out kind of a little bit later when I looked back at what I was eating. That's completely why, lack of exercise, lack of activity, plus making really bad food choices led to me being as large as I was.
Yeah, and unfortunately that's true about a lot of Americans, the obesity epidemic, but you had kind of taken that to more of an extreme.
Yeah. And like I said, part of it was kind of, I would almost say now looking back, almost kind of lying to myself. I'm not that big. Anytime I'd see somebody out in public that was maybe a little bit bigger than me, I would think, well, at least I'm not that guy or that person. But, it started really 2.5 years ago in around March of 2017. I started getting progressively worse where I was being active was really difficult. Walking from my desk at work just out to my car, I'd have really bad severe back pain. And it was really starting to I couldn't do much with my kids. Taking my kids places was very difficult. So like it just was really starting to impact me.
So what made you finally decide to go to the doctor?
Well, originally, like I said, I was having a lot of back problems, or what I perceived to be back problems, and I wanted to see if there was anything that the doctor could do for me. So I asked my wife, and she had set up an appointment for me. When she scheduled it, and they asked what it was for, because prior to that, I hadn't gone to the doctor in probably a decade. Tried to avoid them at all costs, because when I had gone in the past, because I was pretty much heavy my whole life, I always heard your weight's a problem, and I just really tried to avoid that at all costs. And so, just because of the back problems, eventually I wanted to go to the doctor and see if there was something wrong.
Tell us about that doctor visit. What happened?
It was a real eye opener. Like I said, not going for quite some time and being as big as I wasn't like I was checking how much I weighed on any consistent basis, because most scales at home didn't work. I was too big for them. So when I was getting screened at the doctors and they were checking my blood pressure and how much I weighed, I kind of stepped on the scale for probably the first time in, like I said, close to a decade, and I was read 509 pounds, and I immediately got really like sick to my stomach, because I didn't think I was that big. I didn't feel like I was that big. And met with the doctor, and the first thing the doctor said was, "You don't have a back problem, you have a weight problem." And you're a pretty young guy still, but you're right, you need to do something soon or it's going to be too late.
Yeah, because you were only 34, right?
Correct. Yeah,
you were a pretty young guy.
yeah. So it was a nice lady. It was my first visit to her. She kind of suggested eating less food and drinking more water, ordered some blood tests, and that was it. She didn't really put me on any type of real path or give me any advice I haven't heard before. But when I was leaving the doctor's office, I was just so sick to my stomach over how much I had kind of let myself go and got up to that weight, that I called my wife immediately and said, "I got to do something today. I can't wait any longer." Because through the years, I had always tried to lose weight, and I would say, "I'll start on Monday," and I try to put it off, or I would start a diet and a couple weeks later I would stop, or I'd have a varying level of success with it, but I would always go back to old habits.
Sure, just like a lot of people do.
Yeah.
It's a standard process. You lose some weight, you go off the diet after you've lost the weight, you gain back that weight plus some more, and then it's just a never-ending cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
And you hear about this with a lot of people that have had dramatic weight loss. There was something that happened that triggered that thing that said that, in your brain that said, okay, this is it. This is the end of it. I've got to do something. It sounds like your trigger was that day that you stepped on the scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost like I kind of hit rock bottom and was just kind of over it at that point. Like I said, through my life, everybody had always said, "I'm worried about you. You need to lose weight." My mother, my wife, all my family. And I always would say, "Yeah, I understand," and kind of push it off. But something I truly believe is, in order for you to make a life change, you really need to want it for yourself and have your own reasons for it. Somebody else, they could want it for you, want it for you as much as they want, but it's really got to come from you. You have to be the one that wants to make that change.
Absolutely. So you decided that day something has to change. How did you decide what to do?
I had, throughout the years, tried varying different things, calorie counting. At one point, I went to a doctor that prescribed me a bunch of medication to lose weight. So this time around, I said, I'm just going to stick with calorie counting. And I immediately started going to 1,200 calories a day or less some days. And I had a lot of success at the beginning, and it was really repetitive. So for some people that may not work, but I just found foods that worked for me that I enjoyed eating and didn't mind if I ate them 5 days a week. So
did you kind of, when you were thinking how boring the food, the repetitiveness of the food, did you think, well, that's the price I'm paying because this is what's going to make me lose weight?
Yeah, a little bit. Like I said, I tried to find ways to like mask the food. So like if I was doing chicken breast, I'd try to find different ways to cook it so that it wasn't so repetitive, or things that I didn't really enjoy eating. But yeah, I mean, definitely I realized it took me 34 years to get as big as I was, and it wasn't going to just fall off overnight. And I had to make a change long term and really accept the fact that while I'm eating this meal that I may not love, in the long run, it's going to be worth it.
But at 500 pounds, 1,200 calories a day, you must have been starving.
Yeah, I mean, at first, the first couple weeks was difficult, and then you kind of fall into a rhythm. I drank a lot of water, and I tried to use my calories wisely. So, for example, broccoli has very little calories. So, if I was eating for dinner, I would have a huge portion of broccoli and then a little bit of chicken. So, I would try to get as full as I could on foods that didn't have a lot of calories, but were large in portion.
Right. Yeah, you can do that with a lot of vegetables.
Yeah.
So that's great. So how did it go? How did the weight loss go from the
So
start?
when you're as big as I was and you cut your calories to that little, the weight comes off pretty quickly. And after about like 2 months, 2.5 months, I had lost 40 pounds. And I was pretty happy with the progress, but I had the fear in the back of my mind that I could always fall back into bad habits and I would lose all that progress like I have in the past. So it was right around that time that I started looking into gastric bypass surgery and trying to, determine if that was something I wanted to look at, see if I could use that and leverage that for weight loss.
I want to say right up front that neither you nor I are doctors, and we're not dispensing any kind of medical advice, and anyone considering this should consult their own doctor. But can you describe what gastric bypass actually does? What's the process?
There's several different types of surgery. So gastric bypass is typically used for when, like, it's the most risky but the highest success rate with gastric bypass. And what they do is they reroute a part of your intestine so that your stomach is very small, 2 to 4 ounces typically, so that it restricts the amount of food that you can eat at one time. So it helps for me. I decided it would be a good tool. So I had to go to a seminar where they explained it to you. And really for me, I looked at it as a tool, and that's the way they explained it. It's not a magic pill. It's not something that's going to make you lose weight overnight. But if you use it properly, you can leverage it as a tool. For me, that's what I wanted to use it as, is if I ate something that wasn't necessarily the most healthy for me, there's only so much of that something I could eat because, again, it restricts how much you can eat.
So the surgery itself doesn't take any weight off. It just restricts what you're able to eat.
Correct. And there's people that have the surgery and don't have success because while it restricts your portion size, it doesn't restrict necessarily what you eat. So some people will have the surgery and, maybe they're eating cupcakes all day long, but they're only having a half cupcake, waiting an hour later and eating another half cupcake. So you still have to really make wise decisions with your food choices. But like I said, if you do fall off and have something that's not necessarily healthy, you can only have so much of that something. So it helps with portion control. What I gravitated to was, hey, this will help me with my portion controls and making sure I'm not taking too many bad calories.
You mentioned earlier that gastric bypass, the one that you had, has the highest chance of success, but it's also the riskiest. What makes it risky?
The surgery has become so common that it's really not risky anymore, or there are some risks to it, but there could be where where they reroute the stomach, there could be a leak, so then they would have to go back in and fix the suture, where there's a leak. There's a few other, just any surgery going under the anesthesia has its own risks. So through the process and through the interview process, they kind of explained it as there's like a certain percentage of people that have passed away from the surgery, but it's so low at this point that like getting your tonsils removed is more risky than having gastric bypass. So I looked at it and the reward outweighed the risk. And if I did nothing, that's more risky than having the surgery.
Yeah, and of course, yeah, and you're right. Any surgery is risky. You're especially something like this where the doctor is literally kind of rearranging your insides.
Yeah.
I can see. So, do they tell you to try to lose more weight before the surgery?
I guess it's different with every doctor that you go to. Some have really strict requirements where they want you to lose a percentage of it. Also, everybody's insurance has different requirements. The company I work for did a really great job of, when they were working out our insurance rates and everything, having it built in where we didn't have to really meet many requirements. We just had to meet the doctor's requirements. And the doctor I went to didn't really have a set limit. He wanted to see some progress, that I was committed to it. But through the process, you have to go for quite a few tests to make sure that you're healthy enough to last through the surgery. But you also have to speak with a psychiatrist, because they want to make sure that this is a huge procedure, and they want to make sure that you're really dedicated to making a lifelong change, and that you're not looking at this as like a magic pill that, once it's done, you're going to lose all the weight tomorrow.
Yeah, there's there's a big mental aspect to this, definitely. So how much weight had you lost by the time you had the surgery?
When I started considering it, I had lost about 40 pounds, and that was right around June of 2017, and I had my surgery in beginning of September, and by then I had lost 90 pounds. So I went from 509 to, it was like 490. I think like 419 the day of surgery.
So you lost 90 pounds. Did you ever consider, man, maybe I don't need to do this surgery, I could just lose it all on my own?
Yeah, I mean, that thought was there, but in the back of my mind, I still had that fear that I would go back to my bad habits. And I was so far into this process and made the decision that this was going to be the thing that kind of like my safety net. And almost like I was doubling down and making sure that, hey, if you do fall off the bandwagon, or if you do make a mistake, at least you can only make a mistake so much, because this is gonna really help you restrict that. So there was a little bit of me, especially on the day of the surgery, because I had never had a surgery in my entire life. So it was a pretty big step, and there was parts of me that wanted to just see if I could, but I had pretty much committed to it, and at that point wanted to follow through.
How nervous were you going in? Like that morning?
That morning I was really nervous. It didn't hit me until they kind of took me into the back and started prepping me. And then me and my wife had to sit in the pre-op area for like 45 minutes. And, I was pretty nervous, but
lots of time to work up those nerves.
Yeah, like I said, I just kept on telling myself that this is going to be for the long term. This is going to be really great for me. And this is something that they do every single day. And it was kind of funny when you're going through the process, and we booked my appointment. The doctor's like, "Oh, you're the first one of the day. And then I have 9 more the rest of the day." They're doing these surgeries in bulk. So
that's a good way to look at it. That's the perspective. I had kind of the same thing when I had LASIK surgery, because you think about it, man, this is your eyes. You really want to, I can see okay with glasses. Do you really want to take a chance on messing that up and everything? But then, the guy that did the surgery has done like 20,000 of them. So it's just routine. It's not routine for me, or, this surgery wasn't routine for you because it's the only time you'd ever have it done. But for the doctor, it's just another day.
Exactly.
Were you exercising at all during this time?
Not when I was that big. When I was 400 pounds, it was still, my mobility wasn't very good. I would try to walk around a little bit more. At work, I'd get up every hour or so and just kind of walk around the building, but I wasn't really doing much, actually, what I would consider exercise.
How long did the surgery take, and how did you feel right after?
The surgery wasn't very long. I think it was about an hour, and then I was in the hospital for 2 days, and the pain, it wasn't too bad at all. In fact, I was probably only took pain medicine for the first day. Then when I got home, they gave me pain medicine. I didn't take any of it because it wasn't too painful, because they did it laparoscopically, so there was only a couple small incisions. So I think I was, like I said, back in the back for about an hour, and then in the hospital for about 2 days. Really, the 2 days is just to make sure they want to make sure that none of the connections where they're connecting the intestines, nothing is leaking or anything. So I went down, and they had to, while I drink some liquid, make sure that nothing, everything was still connected and there was no leaks.
Right. You don't want any leaks. That's for sure. So how long did it take to to fully heal?
Not long at all. I took they recommended 2 weeks. So the first week I worked from home, and then I took like 3 days off of work. I used PTO, and then I worked from home the following week, and then I was back at work. Now, like I said, not very active at work, so it wasn't too bad, but I was up and able to drive and do everything I needed to within 5 to 7 days.
So did the people at work, I mean, I'm thinking if they didn't really understand, you probably explained to them what the surgery was, or they probably knew, but I'm just thinking some people that didn't really know, they might see you come back the first day of work and think, well, wait a minute, you're the same size.
Yeah. No, I think they kind of knew. And the surgery is becoming more common, so there was other people in my office that have had similar surgery, so they kind of saw other people that had gone through the same process.
What were the instructions that they gave you on how your eating habits had to change? Just eat less, or was there something else more than that?
One of the things that once you had the surgery, I was told can't do moving forward is like no carbonated beverages. So I haven't had like a soda or carbonated water or anything carbonated in like 2 years. So it's something to do with the food, the way that the carbonation can react with your stomach. Also, when I do eat, I can't drink and eat. So I can drink something and then 30 minutes before I eat, and then after I eat, I have to wait 30 minutes to a half hour to drink something. And then just small portions.
I got a question about the drinking, though. What would happen if you didn't wait?
If I didn't wait, it could actually increase the size of my stomach. It could make me sick because the food kind of naturally digests, and if you drink, it kind of will force the food down. So you can get kind of nauseous and sick from it.
And of course, the main thing is you have to have smaller portion sizes. But I would think if your stomach is so much smaller, you must get full pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird. Right after the surgery, I believe it was 2 weeks, I had to be on like a liquid diet. And then I was finally able to eat like soft food. And one of the first things I had was a single scrambled egg. And they tell you to kind of eat slowly. And just naturally, I've always eaten kind of fast. And I got about halfway through the egg, and I had to eat too much. Like I got nauseous and sick. So like a half of a scrambled egg has filled me up at first.
That has got to be the weirdest thing. I mean, when you think about before, you could sit down to a burger and a double cheeseburger and fries and a beer, and you're fine. But now you got half an egg,
yeah,
and you're feeling full. That's just weird.
Yeah. And over time that changes a little bit. So now I can eat a little bit more. Now I could probably eat like an egg and a half to two eggs scrambled. But at first, I was on liquids, so my stomach, was pretty small. But yeah, it definitely messes with your mind a little bit because you're so used to eating big portions, and now you're eating way smaller portions. Because even throughout the process prior to my surgery, like I said, while my calories count was really low, I was eating large portions of broccoli and healthy foods. So like big salads and things like that, just a lot of lettuce, and not because salad, depending on how you make a salad, sometimes it can have a lot of calories. So, but yeah, it took some time to getting adjusted to.
Was there any concern about, I mean, I'm thinking fundamentally, if you physically can't eat very much food, what about, I mean, your body requires a certain amount of protein and carbohydrates and, a certain amount of nutrition.
Yeah.
Can you get enough by what you're able to eat?
That's a really good question. One of the things you do have to go on immediately is supplements. So multivitamins, vitamin B, vitamin D, iron, protein. Like they want you to drink protein shakes and things like that. Things that are really high in protein. So, and I'm not a huge fan of protein shakes. It would take me like an hour to drink a protein shake, especially when my stomach was that small. Now it's a little bit different. Because I'm 2 years removed, I can eat a little bit more, and I eat a little bit more frequently. But at first, a lot of supplements.
Okay, so take us out, let's say like 6 months post-surgery. What was your weight, or how did you lose the weight after the surgery? Was it just as quickly?
Yeah, actually, it was really quick. It started falling off really quick. So I had the surgery in September, and it was right around March is I kind of hit my first plateau. And at that time, I was down to about 275 pounds, maybe 280.
So at that point, you had lost like 230 pounds.
Yeah. It just started slowing down to, at first, I was losing like a pound a day, like almost every day. Like it just was coming off really easily. And I was really happy. Like I was happy with my progress, but I didn't want to stop there. So, just one night I decided I was going to go out for a walk. So I started doing like nightly walks, going for like a mile, 2 miles, just walking.
Mm-hmm. So you started walking. How did you transition that into running?
One night I just decided the walking was all right, but I wanted to kind of challenge myself. So I decided I would see if I could run. I work with a couple of folks that labeled themselves as runners, and they were always talking about like 5Ks and doing those on the weekend, and it sounded interesting. So I decided like I would just try to run for a mile, and I didn't enjoy it at all. It was very hard, and I wasn't very good at it.
And people listening to this right now are thinking, yeah, I can understand. I wouldn't enjoy it either.
It was really just to try to see if I could do it. And that was, like I said, probably around May, I think, was when I first wanted to try doing a mile. And I slowly started improving and was able to do a mile. And then one of my coworkers who, like I said, classifies herself as a runner. She does a lot of 5Ks. She kind of challenged me and said, "Hey, I'm doing this 5K. Why don't you do it with me? It's in September." So it kind of gave me a couple months to train for it. And I said, sure, I'll give it a shot.
So you set a goal of doing a 5K, and that's a common exercise program. It's a thing called Couch to 5K. Did you do that, or did you just kind of create your own training plan?
This kind of did my own thing. At the time, we were living in Middleburg, Florida, which isn't too far from where we're at here in St. Augustine. And my daughter's karate school, she had karate every night, was 3 miles from our house. So I would walk a mile, try to run a mile, and then walk a mile. Then I would try to switch it up and maybe run the first mile, walk the second mile, run, so I would just try to change it up as much as I could up to the lead up to the actual race.
Yeah, you can only do it a little bit at a time. That's the way to do it. How did your coworkers react to seeing? I mean, they're seeing you get smaller and smaller, right?
It was funny because I had moved down from Pennsylvania. I've worked for the same company for it's over 15 years, and I originally started working for the company in Pennsylvania, where I lived originally. We moved down to Florida about 6 years ago, but I had a lot of coworkers up in PA, and they came down on a business trip and they saw me for the first time, and they were just shocked. Because I looked like a different human being.
Yeah. It's always fun to have those interactions, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to be shocked.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us, how did the first 5K, how did that go?
It went better than I thought it was going to. I finished in just under 34 minutes. So I was really excited, and I ran the whole thing. I was really, that was one of my goals, is I didn't really care how quick it was. I wanted to run the full 3.1 miles without stopping or walking. And I was able to do that, and I got really excited for that, and it's what hooked me on running. And then in the following months, I think I ran 5 or 6 5Ks, through November, December.
Yeah. And 34 minutes, that's like an 11-minute pace. You didn't come in last place, obviously.
Yeah, no, I think I'd have to look back, but I think it was like 5th place in my age group, so I was pretty, like I said, I was really, really happy with the result.
Yeah. I think that's part of the key to a long process like this, is having wins all along the way. That's what keeps you motivated.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I always liked, kind of when I first started running, really enjoying, was it's very, you can see the progress, and you can measure it. I remember doing like treadmill training, which at first I used to do a lot. Now I enjoy running outside much more. But at first I remember, hey, I just ran a 10-minute mile. That's the first time I ever ran one. And then I'd take a picture of the treadmill to kind of look at it, and then I could look back and say, okay, 2 weeks ago I couldn't keep an 11-minute pace, but now I can keep a 10-minute and 45-second pace.
Yeah, it's obviously obvious progress for
Yeah.
sure. When you did that first 5K, what was your weight?
I think it was 220 ish.
Okay.
I mean, for my size, I'm just right under 6 feet, 5'11". So
All right. So what did you what happened after that?
in the beginning of 2019, the same coworker that challenged me to the first 5K said, "Hey, the Gate River Run's coming up. It's the largest 15K, one of the largest 15Ks. You should try it." And prior to that, I had never ran more than 3 miles. I didn't even know of the long run. So I didn't do anything more than that. So I was really hesitant because they also, on the same day, they have a 5K. And I was like, I'll sign up for the 5K. And she's like, no, you got to do the 15K.
You got to do 3 5Ks that day.
Yeah. So I decided I would give it a shot, and I signed up for it. And I think it was the very beginning of January. And I started picking up my training, running a little bit more. At that time, I was running 3 times a week, doing 3 miles a run. So I was doing 9 miles a week, and I think I bumped up. The most mileage I did was like a week or two before the 15K, and I had gotten up to, I think it was like 25 or 30 miles for the week. With, I think my longest run was 8 miles.
One of the things you got to watch out for when you're training and increasing your weekly mileage is injury.
Yeah.
You could pull a muscle or anything like that. Have you had any kind of running injuries?
I've been pretty fortunate. I've only had one, and it was way after this, kind of after I started doing a couple of ultra marathons, is when I had my first scare, but it wasn't anything too serious. I think I just rested for a couple of days and I was fine.
It seems like you have a natural gift for running. I mean, some people just have that built in. I've done some ultras myself, but I don't have that gift. That's why I'm so slow. But what happened after you decided, even after the 15K, you finished that in a pretty decent time, and you wanted to go even farther?
Yeah, so I finished the Gate in an hour and 26 minutes, and at that time I kind of realized the longer runs I could keep the same pace for quite some time, and with the shorter 5Ks, I would go to some of the small events and I would do okay. I think I came in like third once or twice, but I kind of naturally realized like I was never going to win a 5K pace with guys my age, because some of them are doing 17, 18-minute 5Ks, and I'm not that fast. So
yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, so I realized this longer stuff, I kind of enjoy it. It's more challenging. So after the Gate and I did the 15K, I said I wanted to do a half marathon. So I was looking all over the place, and I couldn't find one. Like everyone I found was either way too far away, but I found a 25K, which was only like 45 minutes from my house. It was the Angry Tortoise 25K, and I went to go sign up, and it was sold. Like I found it. I could register. I waited a day, and it was sold out. So I had to actually reach out to the race director, and she graciously let me join the race, even though it was sold out.
Wow, that's nice.
It was very exciting.
And that's a 25K, which is 15 and a half miles, roughly.
Yeah. Yep. And the way I figured, I was like, it's not, if I was going to do a half marathon at 13.1, what's a couple extra miles?
What's a couple extra miles? Why not? Okay,
Yeah.
so you did that one, and then you went into the world of ultra marathons, which is anything longer than a standard marathon. A standard marathon is 26.2 miles, and you moved into the world of ultras without even doing a marathon.
So I really enjoyed it. The 25K was also my first trail marathon, which I really liked, and it went really good up until the very end, and then I got some cramps, and I didn't stop at any of the aid stations. I made a bunch of mistakes. So I kind of walked a portion of the end of the race and then ran it in at the end. But I felt, after the race, I was slightly disappointed in my result. Even though I finished it, I was happy with that, but it wasn't necessarily in my goal time that I wanted to finish. So I almost immediately wanted to do another trail race. And then I found a 50K, and I decided I was going to sign up for that. It was the Sweat Swat Swear. And that was I want to say it was May. And it was like the hottest day of the year. And I kind of got hooked on it from there.
So you've done a 50K. You've done a couple of things that most people would look at and say, that's impossible. I could never do that. You went from over 500 pounds, you lost all that weight, but then you've also gotten into and you've finished a 50K race, which is 31 miles.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about, man, a couple of years ago, you're like a different person, a completely different person now. How do you process that in your mind?
It's kind of hard. It kind of fucks with your mind a little bit. Excuse my language, but because I remember, when I was 500 pounds, hearing all my friends, coworkers talking about running, and I would joke with them and say, "You guys are crazy. Like, must like to torture yourselves." But I kind of, once I started running, it really, it's something that I kind of found that it kind of relieves a lot of stress for me, and it's just something I really gravitated towards. And it does mess with your mind a little bit to think about how much of a difference in lifestyle it is.
And I know ultra runners have kind of a different relationship with pain than maybe the typical person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. My wife always looks at me and my toenails are all black, and she just looks at me, shakes her head sometimes, and doesn't understand why I do it. But for me, like I said, it's just kind of, it's a challenge to see how far, how hard, how long can I run, how hard can I run.
Are you at your goal weight now, or what do you weigh now?
I vary day to day. If I weigh myself in the morning, I'm about 195, and then after I hydrate and everything after my run, I'm usually 200-ish. So I'm pretty happy with the weight I'm at. At one point I had gotten down to 182 pounds, but it wasn't healthy. I didn't do it the right way. I kind of, before I started really running hard, I kind of became obsessed with the number on the scale, which was kind of unhealthy. I would definitely dehydrating myself. I would hardly drink anything all day, and didn't have the best relationship with food for a little bit.
Just to see how low that number could go.
Yeah, I wanted to hit under 180. I wanted to. It's kind of silly, but the BMI, the body mass index, for me to be a normal weight was 179 pounds, and I wanted to get to a normal weight, and I was doing it at any cost, and it got to a point where it was actually making my running harder, because like I said, I was dehydrating myself and just wasn't eating enough calories for how much I was putting out. So now I'm happy with where I weigh. I drink a lot more fluids and make sure I'm properly hydrated and have good nutrition.
Do you have a coach?
I do not. I've considered it, but I just find there's a lot of resources online, and I think one day I probably will look to have a coach, but I have had a decent amount of success so far, at least with no injuries and things of that nature. So
yeah, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, eventually I've looked into it, but it's not something I've kind of pulled the trigger on yet.
So what's next? What kind of races do you have coming up?
So I have a 50-mile race in November 2nd. It's the St. Sebastian. Now they're only doing the 50. They had a 100-mile event, but I guess they didn't get enough people. So I'm doing the 50-miler in November. I'm looking at possibly doing something in December. And then in January, I have the long haul, which is a 100-mile race.
100 miles.
Yeah.
Do you have your training plan already mapped out?
My training plan is pretty much just to do what I've been doing. At this point, I run 100 miles a week at least. So I kind of just been doing that since I signed up for those races. I've just kind of committed to doing 100 miles a week at least. And
yeah, it's a big difference. I went from 50K to 100K. And then it took me a couple of years of training. Well, actually, I trained for a year to do my first 100-miler. And then situation came up that I like a week before, and I wasn't able to do that race. So I had another year of training to do that same race the following year. You gotta respect 100 miles. That's a serious distance.
Yeah, it was right after I did the 50K in May is when I signed up. I finished the 50K, and that Monday is when I signed up for a long haul in the St. Sebastian. And I right away realized, like, I've got 6 months or so to train for this, and to do it right, I have to get my mileage up. And that's kind of where I had the injury scare. I went from doing like 45 to 50 miles a week to I did a 69 mile and then like an 80-mile week. And I was having some pain in my right shin, but it was not where you would traditionally get shin splints. So I thought it was a stress fracture and went to the doctor and had some x-rays taken, and they said it was just a little bit of overuse. So they told me to rest for a few days and took it easy for 2 to 3 days, and then I felt fine.
It's almost kind of hard to imagine. Just 2.5 years ago, you were over 500 pounds. And now this, in a few months, you're going to be at the starting line of a 100-mile race. How would you describe how different your life is now?
It's dramatically different. I can't even I think back to what my life was before, and I kind of was a sloth. I just didn't do anything, and it impacted my kids, my wife. It wasn't good. And now it's not just running, but I'm just more of an active person. So I wake up at 4 a.m. every day just to make sure I get my runs in. And then from there, I go to work and I feel energized. I come home, I do a run I do like a 3 or a 5 mile run every night, but my daughter comes with me and she's riding her bike. So it's just trying to be not only just more active, but more engaged with my family. And, some of the changes I've made have kind of really let me do that, because before it just wasn't possible.
And now you've got so much of a better chance of seeing your kids grow up and growing old with your wife. And, whereas, you were on a track to not make it very far.
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of another very large motivating factor. Not only was just stepping on the scale, but kind of taking a look back at the big picture and seeing how I was impacting my kids. And one memory that sticks out is we went to Universal in Orlando, and we were there for 40 minutes, and I couldn't walk anymore. And pretty much we had to leave, and my kids were devastated. They had wanted to go to Universal. We had spent all this money to take them to Universal, and I couldn't make it for more than 40 minutes.
That's like a punch in the gut.
Yeah, it really it doesn't make you feel good about yourself. And
yeah.
So, and that was right before I had started kind of on a downward spiral where I was having more and more problems just being mobile.
Well, you did it, man. That's congratulations. You have really defied the odds, and it sounds like you're the type of person that relishes a challenge.
Yeah, there is something about challenging myself. I know they say kind of race your own race and things like that, but I'm always looking at, I recently did the 6-hour TikTok Ultra race, and
you did you may not mention it, but you did pretty well in that race, right? How did you finish?
I finished first overall for the 6-hour event.
Yeah.
But going into the race, I had set some goals, and I didn't really make it known to anybody but my wife. And I said, hey, I'm looking at the last couple of years' results. I see what other people have done. I think I can do really well. So I do get pretty competitive with myself, and I knew how my long runs were going, and I kind of targeted how many miles I thought I could finish. And kind of the same thing with the 50 mile and the 100 mile. I have some goals that I kind of haven't told too many people, and I told one person about what I want to finish my 100 in, and the guy just looked at me and said I was crazy.
Well, for your first 100, just finishing is a great goal.
Yeah.
Anything on top of that is that's just icing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll see you out there. I volunteered several times at Long Haul because it's right here in the Tampa area. And so if I get out there in January, maybe I'll see you out there. It'd be good to see you in person.
That would be awesome.
Hey, Ray, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We just try to catch up with people that we've had on before, and people have just now heard your story of losing all that weight and running really long races. So just want to hear what's happened. And of course, the big question everybody's going to ask is, okay, it's been however long, 5 years. Has he kept the weight off? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, for the most part, I have kept the weight off. I actually today weigh 193 pounds. There were some challenges, and there was a point in time a year or two ago where I did gain some weight back, but I was able to kind of readjust, and now I'm back down to where I was 5 years ago.
Beautiful, man. And are you still running?
Yeah, every day. Actually, I didn't run today because I just had oral surgery, but yeah, every day I'm running.
Would you say running is, you're kind of addicted to it maybe?
Yeah, I think I kind of substituted my obsession with eating bad food for just now, running.
Usually you think addictions aren't a good thing, but I mean, when you can substitute one like that for one, that's healthy. Of course, some people would say running long distances, like 50 miles or, that some people would say that's a little extreme. Maybe it's not healthy, but I think you and I would disagree with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think now that I'm getting a little bit older, there definitely is a balance to running longer distances and just making sure that, you're not overdoing it during your training because, injuries will happen.
The funny thing is, the ultra running community has a lot of older athletes in it. It seems like that's who kind of gravitates toward it, because it's not really designed for, those races aren't for speed. They're just for endurance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, definitely see older people at ultras now. It's becoming more common for sure.
Yeah. I did my first ultra, I think I was 51.
Oh, wow.
And I don't do them now. I did several, but I've switched to biking since my last one. What's the longest race you've run so far?
I completed 100 miles once.
Nice.
Yeah, right after so almost 5 years ago, I think the last time I spoke with you, I was prepping for a 50 miler. I had signed up for a long haul 100. So I finished long haul that year in 2020.
I've worked at aid stations at Long Haul, and that's a fun race, but that's like 5 20-mile loops, right?
Yeah, I think they changed the format now because I think they changed locations, and I haven't been back since they're at a new location. But yeah, when I did it, that's what it was.
And that's always or at least when I did it, it was in January. Mm-hmm. Man, I remember those overnights. Some of those were cold and windy, and I didn't even like being at the aid station yet, much less, thinking about, man, the runners, they come in, they get stuff, and they got to go out and run another 20 miles in that cold, bitter weather. People think in Florida, yeah, bitter weather, right? What's that? But it does get a little uncomfortable here sometimes.
Yeah, and 40s is, when you're running, it gets a little chilly.
Yeah, especially at night. Yeah. And I understand your wife has also embarked on a weight loss program. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the last year and a half, she's actually lost close to 150 pounds. Just diet and exercise. She started going to, she hates running. I can't get her to run anything with me, but an Orange Theory opened up about 5 minutes from her house, and she signed up for that, and just to see what it was all about. And now she's obsessed with it. She's going 4 or 5 times a week.
Hey, it's whatever works. Not everybody's into running. Not everybody's into going to a gym and working out like at Orange Theory either,
Yeah. I could not do that.
Yeah. It's like when I love biking, but I would not enjoy biking like on one of the Peloton machines, stationary. I got to be out and, flying down the road. It's not the same when you're stationary, I don't think.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah.
Same thing with running. I can't run on a treadmill.
Yes.
It pains me.
Same thing. It's like you're not making any progress. You're just in the same place the whole time. That's just a mental thing.
Yeah.
So what races do you have coming up?
I haven't signed up for one. I'm trying to decide. I want to do something in December, but races have gotten very expensive, so I have to be pick and choose nowadays. But I want to. I'm targeting either a 50 mile or 100 miles. The Daytona 100. I tried the 50 miler a few years ago, and it did not go well. It was actually right before I ended up having to have neck surgery in 2022. So in that December of 21, I tried running that race, and I got 10 or 15 miles in, and my arms went numb because I had a pinched nerve. I had my spinal cord was being compressed. So I didn't know it at the time. I just thought I slept on my neck wrong, and then afterwards found out that I had to have a fusion surgery.
You don't want to mess around with that. That could be serious.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a race down here in the Tampa Bay area. It's called the Pinellas Trail Challenge, and it's 46 miles. And I crew a runner every year. I've been crewing a different runner every year for 10 years now. I do a bike crew, so I pull a trailer with ice and fuel and water and all kinds of stuff like that. And the entry fee is $0. So if you want to do that one, come on down, and I'll be your crew.
Absolutely. That sounds great. Yeah, definitely. I've seen that one. I've looked at it. Things have just haven't lined up. But yeah, I think next year I'm going to target that one for sure.
Cool. Yeah, maybe I'll see you there then.
That sounds great.
Thanks again, Ray, and good luck with your races.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Scott.
You can see a recent picture of Ray and his family at the episode notes. That's at whatwasthatlike.com/196. You've heard me talk about the What Was That Like podcast Facebook group, and we have a blast in there. And last week we did something kind of fun. You may have noticed the podcast now has a new opener with different audio clips, and those clips all come from previous episodes. I've been changing that opener audio every couple of years, and I did a new one starting with last week's episode, which was with Jessica. That's episode 195. And in the Facebook group, we had a little contest. I wanted to find out who could identify which episodes those new clips came from. And there are actually 9 audio clips in that new opener. Some of them you can probably figure out pretty quickly, but it's going to take a little bit of work and research to actually come up with what 9 episodes those clips came from. And the first 3 people to email me with the list of episodes in the correct order got to choose anything they wanted from the What Was That Like merch store. You see what you're missing by not being in that Facebook group? Come on over and join us. whatwasthatlike.com/Facebook. And if you're interested in getting some podcast stuff like hats, hoodies, t-shirts, coffee mugs, or other stuff, that's all at whatwasthatlike.com/merch. I don't usually promote that here, but there's a lot of stuff there if you want to go check it out. If you like this episode and you enjoy hearing about people who have made some amazing turnarounds, you might like my conversation with Amy from episode 95. She was overweight and hated her job, and then one day while she was at work, her office building was blown up by terrorists. That episode is number 95, and it's titled, Amy's Office Was Bombed. Graphics for this episode were created by Bob Bretz. Full episode transcription was created by James Lai. And now you're about to hear this week's listener story. If you have a story you can tell in about 5 to 10 minutes, record it on your phone and email it to me, scott@whatwasthatlike.com. You listen to this podcast all the time, so how cool would it be to hear your voice telling a story here? Because we all want to hear it. This week's story is about helping a stranger. Stay safe, and I'll see you here next week with a Tuesday question and a brand new episode on Friday.
I'm from Manitoba. It's the prairies, harsh, long winters. My husband Byron and I were in Phoenix, Arizona, and we were there just for a long weekend, a little getaway in fall before things got really cold in winter. We decided to go on a hike. And the hike was so much different than the landscape that we're used to. It was hilly and deserty and hot. And you know what? Let's just face it. I'm not a very athletic person. I don't mind hiking. I really don't like being hot. So it was fine enough. So we get to the park where the hike is, and there's an office where you check in. So we checked in and we got our little map, and we did see one or two other hikers there. And one of the hikers that we saw was a woman, an older woman than us, and very petite, very slender, had a cane, and she was walking with a sort of an odd gait to her. And so we both noticed that just because it was different, and we were curious how a hike on the hills and the rocks like that would be for her. But we didn't pay any more attention to that. So I would say the hike probably would have taken us about an hour, walking at a really average pace. Nothing too fancy. So we were walking, we were like 3/4 of the way done. And we turn a corner and we see this woman that we had seen in the beginning with the odd gait to her. And she had fallen into a little culvert, into a hole. And there were rocks there, and she had fallen, and she was sitting there. She was bleeding from the head. And like, we went up to her, "Are you okay?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm fine. I don't need help." And we're like, "Well, let's just get you up. Let's just get you standing." She just like really didn't want us to help her, but we're not going to leave her there. And so she got up. "Well, I'm fine. You can go now." "Well, let's just walk together. Let's walk back to the office together." And she couldn't even take one step, and she was going to fall over again. And like I said, there was blood coming from her head. My husband, Byron, "Okay, why don't you lean on me? Let's just start walking." And it was very clear very quickly that she was not going to be walking back to the office on her own, and that we would be accompanying her the whole way, which was completely fine. And we ended up chatting. She was a nurse in her, when she had a career, she was a nurse. And she's like, "Don't worry about my head bleeding. You know, head wounds bleed more than other parts of the body. So you don't really need to be concerned," which a fact that I've retained to this day. Like, oh, don't be too concerned about a head wound right away necessarily. We talked about our life in Canada, and she talked about her life in Phoenix. And it took us like over twice as long, very small steps all the way back with some rests. And it was hot. Finally, we got to the office. "Okay, I'm fine. You can go now." "Well, let's just make sure that you're okay. You're going to get home okay." "I don't want an ambulance." And the staff has said, "Well, we can't force her to, so she's on her own." Well, there was no way after, nursing this hike that we were going to let her drive home if we could help it. She just said, "I'm fine. My husband, I don't have a phone. I'm going to have to I'm just going to drive home." And we just like, oh, this is not safe. And we came up with the idea, how about if my husband drives her car home with her in the front seat, I will drive home right behind. And like, this is before Ubers, taxis and stuff. And she wanted there was taxis, of course, but she would not hear of taking a taxi. She wanted to do things on her own. So she agreed that we could drive her home together. So we did that. It was like half-hour drive or so. As I'm driving, I'm like, okay, her husband is home. Like, wow, how is this going to be when she gets home? Is he going to be like happy to see her, or is he going to be like worried about her and, want to hear all about what happened from us? Not that it mattered. I was just curious. And so we get to her house. We drive up the driveway. He's outside. He's kind of scowling at us, and he's kind of glaring at us. He doesn't say thank you. He doesn't say hello. He doesn't say goodbye. She mumbled goodbye and left her vehicle, and we left her vehicle, got into our vehicle, and we had returned her to her home. That was it. Kind of a funny story, but I'm going to remember it always, I think.